So it's about 20 minutes before my D&D session starts, like I did last week. We're going to go over what I think is going to happen. I'm moving around my basement because I'm actually about to leave. I'm going to do this in the car because of reasons, because I need food. But, so, what's going to happen this week is I have this Lego dungeon set out. Don't mind this stuff. So, these are just two of the characters that I made. The rest is here. So, in this chamber, well, let's get a better shot. So there's these seven kind of hodgepodge people. There's two goblins. One of these is the hooded figure that the players saw. There are two gnolls, one here, one there, two orcs, and an aarakocra. So happen, hopefully, is that they're going to see all these random creatures. They're going to think, what is going on? The goblin chieftain is going to say, halt. I'll do a different accent on throat. It's not the best right now, but I'm going to do a different accent, and he's going to say, halt, who goes there? And the party will identify themselves, hopefully, and not just go into this guns blazing. I have a very bad feeling, and one of the players I was talking to him about this, he's like, a lot of these characters are in morally gray area. So if you're trying to get them to do something that's not in gray area, they're going to do this for money. They're not going to do this because it's morally right. They're going to do it for money or their own motives. So that is something I'm going to have to keep in mind throughout the entire campaign, is what is their motivation and how are they actually going to do this. So these seven characters are going to be are part of that coalition that is against the goblins who are waging war against men. I have not decided what their name is yet. We'll have to see how that goes. I need to write a name down though, because it's literally 20 minutes. But so we will get them a name, and it's going to be interesting, because what's going to happen is that the Knights of not the Black Rose, Thalion's Black Guard, who are essentially the Gestapo of Kadok, are going to be following the heroes because they are under suspicion for murdering the king. So they're going to follow the heroes, and they're going to enter, and the end of the session is going to be the Knights of the Black Guard saying, "You are under arrest for the assassination of the king." End. So we'll see how this goes. The goblins do have a way out. There's a tunnel that leads to another city outside of the territory of men. It leads into the deserts of Gon, which was the desert of the ancient empire, which is kind of like no man's land. It leads into a city just tucked away in the mountains. So that's also part of the coalition. So then it's going to be a race. It's not going to be a race, but the next... Now, I won't tell you what happens in the next session in case any of the players watch this. And there goes the water. So, we'll see how this goes. Hopefully, nothing too strenuous happens. But like I said, they're going to go into the dungeon. They're going to meet the coalition of orcs, goblins, and aarakocra, who are going to say, look, we don't want to fight the king. We're for the king. This goblin chieftain was actually a friend of the king, of the true king. And they've just assassinated the usurper. So, we'll see how this goes. I'm very interested to see how this goes. And, yeah. So, I will see you all after the session's over. So, when last we left our heroes, they had just eliminated the tiefling who was in the shop and had looted it. Tellum got his armor. No, excuse me, not his armor, the lion's shield, which he still does not know what it does yet, and I'm not going to say until he figures that out. Until I reveal it to him. They were implored by the temple guards, not the temple guards. For some reason I thought Jedi Temple. They were implored by the city guards, one of them being a captain that Norbert served with during the last Great War. And they went to find the, excuse me, words are hard today, if you can't tell. And they went to find the assailant who murdered the king. So, unfortunately, we did not have all of our players this evening. But then we did have we had Thrumming, Armis, Tellum, Norbert, and Alexander. So we had 5 of the 7. So I was willing enough to continue with that many players. So they track this direwolf tracks with some Armis, who is the ranger, doesn't roll very high. However, Norbert, who is the battle medic, Norbert and Tellum rolled really well, and were able to keep up with the tracks of the direwolf. And they went and tracked it, Thrumming kind of bringing up the rear, just this big tree, bringing up the rear. And they tracked it to this abandoned keep, mossy stone covering it. And they begin to around, they find this long room, and in the back corner of it, they find a tower that's still relatively intact. They open the door, and it is a room filled with buttons. Alexander, being the character that he is, runs into the room. Well, first Armis made a perception check or investigation check. No traps. So Alexander runs in the room and begins pressing everything. And Armis immediately begins to restrain him. Nothing happens to any of these buttons because they're not really pressing in. The way I designed this room is that all of these, they looked like buttons, but only one of them was actually a button. Norbert rolls an investigation check. He finds the button. He presses it. Stone door opens, leading down to a deep dungeon. So, party goes through, and they come to a junction where they can either go right or they can go forwards. He chose to go right. And they go to this room, and I described it in this Indiana Jones floor with pressure plates covered by moss, with what seemed to be carvings on the walls beside them. And at the far end is a pedestal with a floating rod. That's all the description they get. They don't see the pressure plates initially. However, someone makes a good investigation check. I don't remember who, but they find out that there are pressure plates. And what do they decide to do? Because I said there's moss covering it because it's very old. They light the moss on fire. And the entire room engulfs in flames. And then, after the flames die out for about 10-15 minutes, they see that there is ash, and has kind of made it easier, but also made it slightly harder to see the pressure plates. So Armis stealthily navigates his way across. There are a few darts that fly. Some of the characters take damage. Then Armis reaches it, and Alexander, being Alexander, runs across the room. Which, there was a room in this dungeon that if they had gone to, they would have found another magic item, which is kind of a very funny magic item. But that would have been the only way that they could have crossed, was to have run across it with a DC 15 dexterity check. So, Armis sees that there's a button on the rod. He examines it, sees the button, presses it, and this light axe spews from the rod. And it's an axe. It's a hand axe. It does 1d8. I don't remember what it was, but it does, I think, an additional d4 radiant damage. So it's a good weapon. It's a good weapon for level 1. So, they continue through the dungeon. They get out of the room. They keep going forwards, and they come to another T. However, they throw a torch down one way. They see it just keeps going on until it veers to the right, and they throw a torch down the other way, and it sees it hits off the stone wall. So they decide to go into this way, clearing the rooms as they go. They find is a room filled with skulls, shelves of skulls, and 3 of those skulls have a ruby in their right eye. And then it comes down to the decision. There are also 3 skeletons in this room. They choose the right skull first, because one of them tries to remove the ruby. The skull activates and opens another stone door behind them. But then they decide to take the other rubies. They take one of the rubies, and all 3 of the heads just go look directly at Armis, who had tried to pull the ruby. Tellum immediately comes in, brings his great axe down, insta-kills one of the skeletons. Another skeleton gets up. Alexander tackles him and begins a bit of a fist fight with him. Norbert and Armus both fire crossbow shots, miss, and then finally Alexander goes down. One of the skeletons stabs him with the short sword. Alexander goes down. And then, no, Alexander doesn't go down. He is reduced to 1 hit point. Norbert is able to take with his bone saw and cleave off one of the skeleton's heads, which goes dong, 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 goes rolling across the floor. And then Armus lands crossbow shot into the other skeleton. They then descend, they then go into this other stone wall that is just opened up. And this is where they find the Coalition of Carthusian. Last time I think I said it was going to be a bunch of goblins. I changed it because I had an idea. So when they enter the room, they see a goblin chieftain, a goblin hooded and cloaked, 2 orcs, 2 gnolls, and an Aarakocra. Aarakocras are these winged, hawk-like humanoids that are supposedly myths in my world. There are many creatures that are supposedly myths in this world. The reason that they're myths is because people don't know that they exist. Their stories have died out. Their species has mostly died out, and now there are just a few thousand or a few hundred that remain, and so they are essentially myths to the majority of the world. So they enter. Armus enters first. The goblin, all the different creatures raise their weapons. Armus raises his crossbow and says, "Guys, get in here." The goblin chieftain, who I've named Borget, says, "What are you?" Borget I got from a Matt Colville video because I liked the name and thought it was a cool name. And Armus replies, "Someone wanting to talk." Borget replies, "Then lower your weapon." Armus says, "As soon as you lower yours." The goblin chieftain is very wary at this point, but he lowers it. Armus and the party lower theirs. And they explain what's happening. And they also find out that these goblins and these species have the true heir to the throne. Edmund, a 13-year-old boy. This is also something I got from a Matt Colville video because I like this idea of the players finding out, being involved in a political landscape and deciding what to do. This is also going to come into play later down the road. So, they find the true son of the king, and Borget explains that they ask, "Well, why haven't you brought this boy forward?" And Borget explains, "I'm a goblin. Did you not know there's a war between goblins and men? If I brought forth this boy, they would laugh me out of the courts and then execute me." And this is true. If he did bring the boy Edmund before the courts, the current king, whose name I have written down somewhere and that I do not have near me because I'm not a great DM, not a prepared DM, as the last video saw, the goblins would have been executed and laughed out, and then the boy would also have been executed because he would have been seen as a goblin sympathizer. So it's a very interesting political landscape. Well, while they're all talking about this and trying to decide, well, what are we going to do? Thrumming, who is our Warforged druid, who's basically Groot, hears metal coming down the steps. And Thrumming informs the party of this, and Borget says, "They come for the boy." Or something like that. Borget knows what's happening, and he pushes, and the rest of the party begins to prepare for battle, and Armus throws down a couple of hunting traps, and Borget places his hand on one of the large stone pillars and concentrates very hard, and it opens. It reveals a ladder going down, an iron ladder. And Borget says quickly and begins ushering the other creatures and the party into the tunnel. Well, as he's doing that, and the rest of the party is going down, they hear, "Stop, right there!" As they're descending the ladder, they hear the tides of battle. And then Borget's corpse is seen flung and lands at the top of the stairs of the ladder. As they're descending the stairs, a what they can only presume is a knight in full black armor, and he brings his hands over the edge of the ladder and looks down, says, "Stop right there!"
And Norbert makes a very good investigation check and sees the ring. That was one thing I forgot. While they are deciding, is this boy truly the king? Edmund presents the Ring of the King, a silver ring with a lion on it, with a blue gemstone. I believe, I don't remember what stone I said. I don't think I said it was a stone. It's this very royal blue stone that's on the ring. That this is a Ring of the King, and Norbert makes a very good investigation check to see if this is truly the Ring of the King, and it is. So, the knight in black armor looks over the ladder, and says, "Halt!" Right there. Norbert makes another good investigation check. Norbert did very well that session. He sees that this is the ring of the Black Guard, essentially the Gestapo of Kadok. They don't know how many there were, they don't know how many are following them, but as soon as they're descending the ladder, so do the Knights of the Black Guard. It is now a race to see who can outrun the other. They get ahead, and the party begins to discuss amongst themselves what they're going to do. Armus still wants to get his bounty, as does Norbert. However, Tellum, kind of beginning to feel out his character a bit, says, well, wait, what if we got both? What if we put this boy on the throne and got our bounty? And the rest of the party begins to consider this idea. Alexander comes forward and hears a rumbling in the wall. And as he's listening to see what it is, his purple wormling bursts out of the side of the wall, lets out a horrific shriek, and combat has begun. Armus and Norbert land immensely damage-dealing crossbow shots. Tellum swings into it with his great axe. Alexander stabs it with a dagger, and even after all that, it is not dead and gets to attack. Alexander goes down immediately, well, within 1 or 2 attacks. I buffed up the purple wormling a bit, just so I could give the party a bit more of a challenge, because I knew if they just had they killed it in 1 round with the hit points that it was given, I gave it a few extra hit points, so at least get 1 round, and I would get a few fun dice rolls in there. It downs Alexander with 2 of its multi-attacks that are bites, and then the sting attack commences. It takes Tellum to 1 hit point. This was a problem, because almost all of their meat, if they let this creature go on, which they didn't, Armus killed it with another good crossbow shot. If it was going to go on, it would not have been pretty. But they continued on. They actually positioned the purple worm so it would stop the Knights of the Black Guard. And some of the characters' backstories are trying to be revealed in these combats. Norbert has dipped vials in werewolf blood, fired across, but he tried to do it with sleight of hand, failed the sleight of hand check, and Armus noticed he was dipping it in a vial. Alexander tries to get more of this purple worm venom. They got a good bit of the venom, so it'll be interesting to see how they use that. I think I gave Armus like 10 shots of the purple worm venom. And then Alexander drinks some deer's blood, which it was, but he has to do that for reasons which I will not say. They figure out what they're going to do. They fire a couple of shots, kill a couple of the guards of the knights, actually. And then they come out. They travel for about 3 hours in these tunnels and come out in Kentor, this kind of lost city of Gon, a fortress where one of the first kings of Gon held against the orc armies when Gon was first beginning to expand as an empire. So I'm starting to reveal more of the backstory of this world, kind of the lore of it. It's going to be interesting to see how they interact with it, because Gon was centuries ago, millennia ago. So they're starting to come across things that should not exist. And after it, Armus drafts a letter, gives it to the Aarakocra, and says, "Can you send it to our friends in Kadok?" And the Aarakocra bows before him, says, "At once," and flies off towards Karok. He sent me that letter today. It's a day after the session. It's a good letter. He was debating whether or not to say, "We are going to turn him in." His letter does not. His letter states, "We are traitors to the throne of Karak." It goes on and says, give me a few crossbow bolts as well. So, I had a very quick section with Yulbus and Doom saying what happens. The Aarakocra lands before them, says, "I bring greetings from your friends," and he hands them the letter. It will be up to Yulbus and Doom to decide how they're going to get there, and if they are going to be captured or not. The guards are now looking for them. They think they are the traitors of the throne. So, we'll see how it goes next week. Some interesting things are going to happen in Kentor. They're going to be there for a bit. Not too long, but they're going to be there for a bit. So, we'll see how it goes. I'm very excited for next week. As always, I am the Galactic Geek. Subscribe if you want to see more of the DM's journal. Peace out.